Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about a little bit of review of what we've already learned in the first few episodes. And we're going to go over the meanings of these terms just real quick. And then we're going to go ahead and do a little quiz to see if you guys think the plants I show you are native or if they're noxious weeds. So let's start with a review of habitat. This is a place where a plant or animal lives. Then we spoke about ecosystems, and that was when the living and the non-living coexist together and rely on one another in a given habitat. And we spoke about the different types of habitats that we have right outside our door. One of those being a forest, another the prairies, and then a wetland or a riparian area. We talked about healthy plant communities and how they are deemed healthy because of biodiversity when there's a lot of different plants in the area. We talked about the definition of a plain old weed, and I showed you a dandelion. And we realized that weeds can be any plant in the world that we don't want growing somewhere. So it can be anything you don't want growing in a given area. Native plants are plants that originated in Montana. They've always been here, and no one or thing brought them here. We talked about noxious weeds, and that got a little confusing, but that was when a weed was non-native and had invasive characteristics, and the Department of Agriculture puts it on this noxious weed list because it causes harm to our economy, agriculture, wildlife, and native plant communities. So let's start with our quiz. I'm going to give you about 5 seconds in between slides for you to guess if this is the native plants or noxious weeds that you are seeing. So let's give it a shot. We'll go over the answers when we get through all of them. So what do you guys think? The yellow one in front of you here. Do you think that's a native plant or a non-native noxious weed? Moving on. How about this one? It's pretty. It's yellow, sometimes called butter and eggs. Do you think it's native or do you think it's a noxious weed? How about this one? Native or noxious? Here's our next one. Native plant or noxious weed? Everyone loves a daisy. What do you think? And the next one? Native plant or noxious weed? How about this one? That's an interesting looking plant. Native or noxious? And our last one. Native plant or noxious weed? All right, let's go over the answers to see how you guys did. Here's our first one, the yellow one, the sunflower, the one that I hope you can all remember the name of. And this is arrowleaf balsam root, and it is a native plant. And if the weather stays warm and we start looking up at our hillsides, we'll start to see these in May blooming all over our hillsides. And they're not just sunflowers, they're arrowleaf balsam root. So I hope you can remember that name. The next one, what do you guys think? It is a noxious weed. This is called yellow toadflax, and it was sold at nurseries up until about 15 years ago, and it was called butter and eggs. And it was purchased because it was a beautiful wildflower. And so this is one we could say that escaped from our gardens. That's how it spreads around. Yellow toadflax can produce about 250,000 seeds a year. It has a relative called Dalmatian toadflax that can produce 500,000, so 500,000 seeds per year. And these look like little poppy seeds. How about this one? It's pretty. This is silky lupin. It's a native plant. It's another beautiful native. Here's a fun fact about this one. So we talk about how we call certain plants weeds because we don't want them somewhere. Well, farmers and ranchers that have cattle or other livestock like sheep consider silky lupin a weed because it's toxic to their livestock. So this is one that not everyone can agree on, but I like it. It's beautiful. How about this one? This one's a tough one. Like I said, everyone loves a daisy. Here's a good rule of thumb. This is oxeye daisy, and this is a noxious weed. This is not the same as the Shasta daisies that we go and buy at the greenhouses. This is a noxious weed. This one did not stay where we put it. So when I'm out driving around and I'm unsure of a plant I see, if I notice that there's an abundance of it all in one place and that's all that you can see growing there, that's a good rule of thumb that it's probably not a native species. It's taking over an area. So see how this is taking over this pasture? Oxeye daisy really likes to do that where animals are grazing because animals avoid eating it. So it has all the room to move. So this is oxeye daisy and it's a noxious weed. How about this one? This one's kind of difficult too. It is not our native fireweed. It looks very similar. This is our non-native noxious weed called purple loosestrife. And this one really likes our waterways. We don't have a big problem with it in Missoula County. We do have it a bit on the Clearwater River. So look out for this one. It's often mistaken for fireweed. How about this one? It's an interesting looking one. This is a native plant. It's called prairie smoke. It's one of my favorites. It goes from that dangling down little pink flower to standing up and growing these long white hairs that have the seeds attached to them. This is another fun one to see out on the prairie when you get out and hike. So prairie smoke, it's a native plant. How about this one? I actually hope you all recognize this one. It is a noxious weed, and it's the most commonly known noxious weed. It's called spotted knapweed. Um, and this is the one that I said first showed up in records in the 1920s. And we think it came in contaminated hay. So this is indeed a noxious weed. It is everywhere, and it's a late season bloomer. So when the rest of our flowers are done blooming, spotted knapweed tends to be the only thing blooming. So we fixate on seeing it. You'll notice it late in August and September. If you look close here at this picture, you can see it's got a fun little bug on it that we're going to talk about later, and that's a biocontrol bug. So I hope you did well on this quiz, and we'll pick up where we left off in the next episode. Thanks, guys.